Thank you.
Welcome home.
It's great to be here. Well, can you guys hear me? Yes. Thank you, Danone, all three. I'm an ugly American, so I'll stick with Danone. I want to thank you for having me. This is a great celebration. I'm excited to talk to you about the future of the kitchen. And I started the Smart Kitchen Summit 5 years ago asking a simple question. And that's, what does the future of the kitchen look like? And it may seem like a simple question, but really it's something that's actually much more complex. This kitchen that looks so much like the kitchens you may have grown up in could be representative of any kitchen over the past half century across 3 continents, is not only the center of the home, I think I could argue that, but also I think the kitchen also is representative and of a cumulative amount of progress over the past hundreds and thousands of years of technology innovation. And I think that's because food and the kitchen benefit from what I would call a network effect of food. This concept that we hear so much about in technology circles and economic circles of the network effect is defined as something gathers more value as more people are connected to it. I think this has been benefiting food for the past hundreds and thousands of years. As people traveled from city to city, from village to village, and eventually food travels across state lines, it gains value. As food travels and meets people in new places, they learn knowledge and more innovation follows. And as I said, it started back since early civilization. As people started taking their food from their local village and heading to the next village over, we saw innovation move. As we saw the advent and arrival of modern travel networks, we saw an acceleration of innovation. And finally, as we've seen the arrival of modern technology and digital technology, we've seen an even faster acceleration of innovation as knowledge transfer is accelerated across the globe over digital communications, over social media. So let's look at the technology innovation of the past 100 years. The celebration of a century for Danone, I think is very apt, because Danone has been alive for what I think we could argue has been the most innovation in food and food technology ever. From things we take for granted, like the grocery store. The modern era of food retail is amazing. The vending machine, we talk about cashierless food sales, point of sale. The vending machine started that. You push a button and magically food pops out. Something so simple as freeze-dried ice cream is space food. It seems so simple, but it's an amazing achievement of food science. So the achievements in food science, the achievements in mass production of food, and ultimately refrigeration so we can preserve the food once it gets to our home. These are things that largely came into being over the past 100 years. But I think it's worth asking as we look at these technologies, what were the values that drove us towards these innovations? Because I think very much the kitchens are a product of our value system, as individually and as a society. And what were the values of the last century? Now, this is a simplification, but I think we can argue that convenience was a big one. Upward mobility as we, as a society, as politically, try to expand the middle class. And just progress. And this isn't a bad thing. I mean, life has been hard for most of our being, most of humankind. It's been hard to live. So making things easier with things like microwave ovens, you push a button, food's ready in a minute. We shouldn't be blamed for that. It's an amazing significance. This first, what I would argue is the last true new appliance category that has become pervasive, the microwave oven. This value system helped us arrive at things like frozen foods. Amazing achievement. But as we look backwards and start to look forward, I think it's worth looking at what will be the macro forces that will shape our value system for the next 100 years, for the next decade, the next 100 years. I think I don't have to educate anyone in this audience that the environmental impacts will be I think the biggest driving force. As we, as a global population, are seeing our Earth taxed, and we're fighting as we move towards 10 billion population to feed this 10 billion population, I think that will be the largest driving factor in our value system over the next 100 years. I think as culture accelerates through communication networks, and we start to see ideas transfer faster, I think that will no doubt be a large driving force for our value systems. And then ultimately technology. It's things like artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, cloud computing, and robotics start to become pervasive, what does that do for our value system? What does it help us to imagine? Well, I think if there's one generation that will see their value shaped more by these large macro forces, I think it's Generation Z. 2019 represents the first year that Generation Z became the biggest generation on the planet. They passed millennials this year. And already they're shaping the way the food industry operates. If you look at, you can't be a restaurant chain, a large restaurant chain, without thinking about how food delivery should impact your business model, or how it's already drastically impacted your business model. 4 out of 6 households today order food via delivery online, weekly. 3 out of 6 households use some third-party delivery service. This has been a rapid acceleration towards digital. There's already 2.5 billion digital assistants in the world, so people using Siri or Alexa or Google Home, from practically zero just a few years ago. In 2023, there will be 8.5 billion digital assistants in the world, basically one digital assistant for every person on the planet. This is a generation that values transparency. They want to know where their food's coming from. They're informed, they're doing their research on the internet, and they want to know where their food's coming from. They want clean labeling. So this will be a key value that I think food companies already know about. A company like Danone already clearly knows this, but I think this is something that other people in the food system need to understand. This generation, Gen Z, as well as millennials, they value personal expression. They value personalization. While they benefited from the mass production of food through our modern food systems, they don't want one-size-fits-all food. They also want to express themselves through food. If they download a recipe on an iPad and look to cook something for dinner, they're not just going to do what BuzzFeed tells them to do, or BuzzFeed Tasty. They're going to add their own flourish and twist to it, because they want to personalize things. They also don't want the same food that you and I order, because they may have a certain nutritional requirement, and so they want something specific towards them. I think that'll be a driving value for them. Clearly, sustainability, we talked about the environment. I think this is a generation where the rubber will be the generation where the rubber meets the road. And not to put pressure on Gen Z, but I think it's going to be the generation that ultimately decides whether or not we as a civilization survives, right? I think old people like me kind of screwed things up. Although we do have Elon Musk and some of those guys trying to save things, I think it's millennials and Gen Z that ultimately will figure out whether or not the Earth can survive, and we can survive on it. Eating is social. I put a question mark there, kind of tongue-in-cheek, because so much of us show it at the dinner table with our screens. But I do think eating, whether it's at the kitchen table, at the cafeteria table, or in a restaurant, is an event for us. It's where this generation learns. It's where they put the screens away, oftentimes, and look into each other's eyes and share what happened to the day. So I think eating is an event. It's where we learn about new things and we explore. This is a generation of makers. I mean, we've seen the democratization of creation technologies, whether it's being able to create an app, something like Arduino to create like a new robot, or the arrival of things like shared kitchens, where we can create a new CPG product. Whereas we didn't before have the resources, now we may have that. So I think it's a generation of makers, and that's exciting. Which kind of brings me to this point. You know, there's been a group of thinkers over the past year or so that have argued, should we even have kitchens at all? And I think it's a reasonable question to ask. Because if we can order food at the touch of a button, why would we need kitchens? And kitchens are expensive. Well, it's precisely because I think the new generation of makers and the new generation of makers that want to share experiences over food, I think that's why kitchens will persist. So let's quickly look at some of the technologies that we've seen over the past year, and then ultimately what technology trends we'll see over the next 15, 20, 25 years. These are just like some new devices that have arrived over the past year and 2 years. AI-powered ovens, cooking robots, home beer brewing appliances. These are things that didn't exist just a couple years ago, but because of new technologies, they're making their way to market, and consumers are using them. But what are the big trends beyond kind of the new gadgets? I think without a doubt, perhaps the biggest trend we'll see is a massive shift towards more sustainable sources of food. Clearly, a company like Danone understands that with their plant-based initiatives, but we're seeing exciting research and work done all over the place. Clearly, 2019 is the year of plant-based, as we've seen the IPO of Beyond Meat. We're seeing the embrace of things like Impossible Foods. We're seeing companies like Solar Foods in Finland explore how to make protein out of thin air, literally use carbon dioxide to make protein, not even using the earth to make food or feed for animals, but actually just taking it out of the air. I think we'll hear some talk about this from other talks, but I think new ways to interface with our kitchens is no doubt going to be one of the major trends. Whether it's touchscreens or projection interfaces or voice, or we're seeing progress in cognitive interfaces, right? Just being able to think and change a physical device and put it into action. I think we're seeing research in that area. I think we're going to move from an era of mass production to an era of mass personalization, right? So not just one-size-fits-all food and nutrition, but I think we'll see, as more intelligence and capabilities move to the endpoints and into the kitchen, we'll see more food production in the home and personalized food production. Of course, we're going to see artificial intelligence drive food-making decisions more and more. This is a picture from a patent that Amazon was awarded last year, where they're actually creating this concept for predictive restaurant ordering. You show up at home, you're hungry, and lo and behold, there's actually a meal on your dinner table that they ordered for you because they thought you might be hungry. Now, this actually seems kind of creepy to me. I may not want it, I may want to send it back, but this is the type of thing that companies like Amazon and Google and the big platform players are thinking about. Certainly robotics and automation, I think are going to have a bigger role to play if we ever get to that fully automated robot chef, I don't know. But I definitely think we'll see more and more automation in the home, more and more robotics to take care of repetitive tasks, to meet special needs. Maybe you have an elderly parent that can't cook like they used to, but they want to continue to live independently. Why not use robotics to help them in certain scenarios? And as food becomes digitized, we'll see new scenarios for food we've never envisioned. This is a picture from a company called Open Meals, where they envision sometime in the future we're sharing a meal and we're co-cooking with people across the world. And we're doing this through augmented reality and through shared digital experiences. But despite all these technologies, all these great advancements that we could foresee, I think there's some constants that were in the kitchen and will remain in the kitchen. I think a company like Danone certainly understands this. And that's taste. Like we've always wanted good tasting food, and we'll continue to want that. Wellness, they maybe didn't call it a wellness like 100 years ago, but like people wanted food to make themselves feel better and their bodies to perform. I think that continues to be the case into the next century. And then we just want value. We just want good value for the food we buy. So just to kind of summarize, I think what I would argue about the kitchen is we'll see these new technologies, some of the ones we talked about and we'll talk about on the panel. But I think one thing I would argue is that no matter what, the kitchen has been the center of the home and the heart of the home, both for sustenance and feeding ourselves, but also for where we gather. And I think it'll continue to be that, and even more so. And I think technologies will help enhance that into the future. Thank you.